Hey, how's it going? Today is Monday. This is G. And I'll kind of I'll explain a little bit of why my name is Gerald, but my last name starts with T, and my whole life they either called me by my nickname, which is Manny, or they would call me uh, either G or GT. People now just call me G, so that's why I chose the name G for the podcast and everything. So that's it on that. Today was a pretty good day. It was a normal Monday. The weather was pretty good outside. It was like 65 here, so it's not bad. It's better than all that snow we had because I was getting kind of fed up with that. But now we got the good weather. I had my windows rolled down. Um, so it was a pretty eventful day. Uh, got up and I got about 2:30. Of course, I overslept a little bit. Oh, you know what? No, I didn't. I What happened was I forgot to set my clock an hour back because I have Netflix or whatever, so I don't have cable, so I don't really get the news, so I don't really get to keep up on what's going on. So I'm watching Netflix, or I'm watching True Blue, or I'm watching whatever. I pay for those, but I don't have Netflix, so I watch the news when I get ready. So in that sense, I mean, it's kind of a little bit relaxing because you don't have those news stories being shoved in your face every day, and your emotions and everything, are going every which way but loose. Now it's just like I don't hear it unless I want to hear it. So it's kind of like I mind my own business, you could say, and I'm not affected by these different stories like every single day, which is what which is basically what the news does. And also, I watch a lot of stuff. I kind of just binge watch stuff over and over again because I'm mostly in here recording. And, if I'm not doing that, I'm doing my ride share. If I'm not doing that, I'm sitting on the couch, grabbing something to eat, or, I'm watching TV, but I'm thinking about, what could I be doing in my sound booth. So I'm really not. The TV is on, but I'm really not watching it. So, and that I spoke about that True Blue. That's the new To Catch a Predator. I don't. I wouldn't say it's as good as To Catch a Predator because To Catch a Predator was the unknown was why you watched it, and it was just hilarious. Not the fact these guys are coming to see these little kids, but the fact that the lengths that they would go through in the process was just it was really scary, to be honest. But it was the show was funny. But this new one is kind of like it's a good show, but it's kind of they need to kind of add some excitement to it. I'm not sure how they could. They've had a couple episodes on there that were, had you kind of on the edge of your seats or whatever. And I mean, I'm not sure how they could spice up that particular situation that really shouldn't be happening. But go figure. Chris Hansen, that's like his his career. He's been doing that for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. So, but it's amazing that, people still keep showing up. So it's not like we can say, blame it on the police or on him or whatever, because these guys keep, going to these hidden websites, or whatever. And, a lot of them have issues too. And it's definitely, I'm glad that Chris and the team is there. It's definitely a problem that needs attention. But, enough about that. I was out driving and this was my first day with my camera, my 360 camera that sees outside, inside, in the back, sees everything. So that's pretty good because with rideshare or anything else, unfortunately, you have to have a camera so people can, I don't know, it makes people act a little bit different, because when they know they're on camera, and it's kind of me, myself, I'm not going to babysit these people. So with the camera, that helps to, you might as well just call it a babysitter, because it's eyes on you, so then I don't have to have eyes on you, whatever people are doing, they'll kind of get in my car sometimes and sit right behind me and kind of crouch right in that corner where my blind spot is, and, another thing people do is they get in and roll the window down. It's a dead giveaway. You're trying to smoke. And it's like, you could have not got in my car with whatever these games you're trying to play. Because like I said, I don't have time to babysit, and if you can't go without a cigarette for, however long it takes to make that trip, 15, 20 minutes or whatever, you got a serious problem. So, but after that, I decided to go get they got this new game called Millions for Life. It used to be like a thousand a week for life or something like that. So I decided to get that game just to, hey, you never know. And I think the first prize is like $1 million. I think $1 million a week for life. And then the second prize is like 100,000 a week for life. I'll take either one. I would just say, just give me 100,000 a week or a month for life. I think it is. Is it a week? It's either a week or a month. But I think it's $1 million a week for life. So, just give me 100,000. Somebody else can have $1 million, and I'm good with that. That's 100,000 a week is more than enough for me. I don't, I'm not trying to live in Beverly Hills. I'm just trying to have enough money so I'm good and I can, give my kids a little pocket money. They're in their 20s. So, I would do what I wish that my mother or father would have done for me had they been able to afford it. Because like I think I said in an earlier episode, I was making more money than my mother at 17. So, and then again, the economy was good too. So I think my mother made like 13 or 14 or something like that. And surprisingly, my mother that I know of, she never really asked anybody to borrow money, and somehow she made, raised a family off that, food and bills and things of that nature. I was like, wow, I was amazed by that. Because, when I was making more than her and I was, of course, always broke because I would go blow my money. But I remember her telling me, if I lost that job, you got to go, buddy. So, those were the good old days. I mean, nowadays I see it all the time, and it kind of gets to me a little bit when you have, these grown kids that's still at home, or, another thing that kind of bothers me is you got these, you know, 14-year-olds that look like Shaq. I got a cousin, 14, look like Shaq. It's like, dude, it's time for you to get a job. You know, time for you to not only get a job, it's time for you to get a job and your own place. You know, because you too doggone big, and, you know, over a certain height, it's time for you to get your own stuff because, you ain't a kid no more. You a full grown man, not the just not the age. And he literally, looks like Shaq. I mean, he's a big boy. I think he's probably 6. He's not as tall as Shaq. He's probably like 6. Right now, he's probably 6, maybe 6'3", maybe. Could be wrong, but he's a bigger guy. He's got to be, from when I looked at him, he's got to be probably, I'd say pushing 300. I'd say pushing 300. But like I said, I don't really. That was the first time I had ever saw him. Last time that I had laid eyes on him, he was a growing boy. And he just had a growth spurt, and he still ain't done yet. So my cousin, he has like the last time I checked, I think he got like 8 or 9 kids or something like that. And that's his prerogative. He wants to make kids and all these baby mamas and all this kind of stuff, and which is whatever. I don't really care because it's not my business. I don't. Part of my doing the work on myself was peacefulness, and that was part of that was, getting out of everybody's business. It's not my business because if you want to have 100 kids, I don't have to raise them, and I ain't got to feed them, and I don't have to deal with them, so it's not my problem. And I think that's part of what I think that's part of some Americans. I think a lot of us, me, I kind of got rid of it. That's a lot of Americans' problem is we spend most of our conversation talking about somebody else's business. It's and I hate to say this, but it's kind of women do it a lot. I'll say that. I'll put it that way. But it's gotten to the point to where men do it, just as much too, and that's kind of that's not good. I mean, because it's like it's like it's taking, it's taking manhood and it's kind of going down the drain. So that in itself can be a little bit trying because the whole manhood thing is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of going down the drain. I was looking at a post. I don't think T.I. really said this because he's a married man, but it was basically a meme saying, hey, I met a girl or whatever, and today, and she wanted me to pay her bill, something of that nature. Like I said, T.I.'s a married man, whatever. And let me make sure I add, allegedly. It was just a meme that I saw on Facebook, and it said that allegedly. But my point is that, first of all, the men today and the women today really couldn't hold a match to most of our mothers and fathers. And if it's not your mother and father, to your grandmother and your grandmother and your grandfather. Couldn't do it, because, your mom, at least my mom, the only thing she wanted my father to do was, get out and get a job. And I think if you go way back to some of my earlier episodes, I talk about this, about how she didn't want to marry my father. She wanted to marry her husband, who she's married to right now. But back then, you married who your parents liked. My grandmother liked my father, so she married my father. So my father, he fumbled the bag because he got the woman and then just kind of screwed that all up. And my mother, all she wanted, she was happy with, you go to work, you go to work and, pay the bills. She was happy with that. But he was like, kind of, unfortunately, he was he was just part of his, what people did back in his particular era, because that was a time when domestic violence was big. Everybody's parents were fighting. It was it was traumatic for me personally, because it was like being a kid and you're upstairs and mom and dad, you hearing your mother, fighting your father and her, just her, get off me, and they, you hearing furniture moving and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes we comedians, sometimes they laugh about it, but there's nothing funny about a kid being in his room and hearing his mother having to fight off, a man. It's just something that stays with you for your entire life, and it's triggering in some cases, because you always hear about or hear other couples, they're fighting or whatever, younger couples, and it's like really, really triggering, because as much as I hate to say it sometimes, I'm just not that person. As many complaints as men have about women, I can't bring myself to be that person who commits domestic violence, because that's just not, it's just not in me. It's just not. I'm not saying I want it to be in me, but men, sometimes we have a lot of complaints about women and this and that, and some women, they go overboard and they, are like, almost haunting you to get you to do something. And, that's when you have to kind of, you're facing your manhood right there, because, you're saying, hey, this is a woman, I'm not, I'm gonna walk away. You walk away and she's still pushing you and hitting you upside the head and all this other type of stuff. And in some cases, some people have made it okay. Hey, if a woman hits me, I'm gonna hit her back and all this kind of stuff. Like I said, I'm not that kind of person, and, sometimes I have to question myself, but I'm not that kind of person. And I've, I went through that as a kid, and I think that was, I don't know, I think it was a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing that it instilled in me certain things, but it was a curse because, what child wants to go through that? It's just not, not something that I would ever, you know, take my kids through or ever took them through. It was the biggest thing with my girls. It was just, they saw me get upset, but they never saw me put my hands on a woman, and I'm glad of that. So at least they can look at me and use me as an example. But yeah, I got home. As a matter of fact, I actually finished up early today. Today was a pretty good day because I got out late, but I actually ended up finishing up early and made what I wanted to make, which was surprising because I was expecting to be out till 4, but I ended up getting done at like a little bit before 3. So that was pretty good. And I was kind of talking with Copilot also, and kind of jotting down some things that I was going to that was some points I was going to hit on today's episode. I can't remember now because I think when I logged off since I reset my phone yesterday, when I log off, it doesn't save my chats, so it was kind of lost. You know how you lose train of thought with some things. So I mean, usually, I mean, I'm the kind of person that loves to talk, because the reason I started this podcast and the other one is because I can't quit on things. I'll give it up today, say, you know what, screw it, I'm done. But I'll go sit on my couch and I'm constantly thinking of stuff, coming up with ideas, and, either later on today or tomorrow I'm back at it, trying something else. I've tried YouTube, I've tried, all these different niches, and, the AI videos and in video and rhymes and all kinds of stuff. And I always thought about doing a podcast, but I said, I kind of kept putting it off, because I just didn't give it enough attention that it really needed. Because I would always think about it and I say, oh, I'll just, let that wait, because that, podcast ain't nothing. I don't know. I think I probably was looking at it as the number one, the longevity that it takes to if ever, earn any income off of it, the consistency and time you have to put into it, and things of that nature. So I think, I know this time, well, I'm saying this time, when I started a podcast, I've never done one before. So I think I did a podcast just for the simple fact of it's a hobby. I love to talk, and there's a possibility that it could generate an income if I'm consistent and stay with it long enough. So it's really a good thing, because it's therapy, because instead of keeping all these thoughts bottled up in my head and kind of my thoughts fighting all day, and I'm thinking of stuff and thinking of stuff and thinking of stuff, a podcast helps me get that stuff off my head. So therefore it's therapeutic to do, because I can get that out in the air. And some people, they talk about podcasts because they say, oh, well, you're really talking to yourself. In reality, you're talking to your listeners. You're getting things out in the universe. Everything that you're saying, you're getting it out in the universe. And usually that will attract a certain type of person that's attracted to what you're putting out in the universe. And that's what it is. You can't look at it as, at least I don't think that you can just look at it as, I'm just getting on here and I'm talking to myself and whatever. I get on here, and as I'm talking into this mic, I'm actually, picturing like a crowd or a person that, that I'm talking to, because, that's who my audience is. My audience, it could be one person, it could be three people, it could be a crowd of people. Those are the people that I'm talking to. And what I want people to get out of it, I just want to get an understanding. I'm not saying that everything I say is right, but I'm trying to get an understanding and get a discussion going, between a group of good people. Because I don't really, one thing I hate is just being around people that are going through things and they don't know how to handle it, and I understand it. And I hate being around angry people. That, for me, I want to be around good people. I want to be around people that are trying to get somewhere, people that aren't giving up, people that are letting go of the people they've outgrown, the situations they've outgrown, people that only want to be around people that are happy for them and people that want to see them move forward. And that's one thing that I admire about, we'll just say Jason Bateman. But I'm talking about all entertainers, because in my opinion, what people got from them, way back in the day, you had rap groups that were, everybody was clicked up. And what I mean by clicked up is there was more than one person. There was a group of guys. So society got the group of guys from that. But what a lot of guys that I have seen or been exposed to didn't get is they didn't get the part where you got this group of guys and all of them are doing something. All of them are networking with each other between projects. None of them are hardly ever hanging out. It's always, hey, can you come over here? I'm doing a video. I want you in it. This, that, and the other. He comes over there. They may hang out a little bit while he's there, but it's never an empty thing, just an empty hangout. Well, I'm gonna go over here and just hang out. And that's what I admire so much about a lot of entertainers, because they're doing so much. The only thing that they have time for is vacation, family. They don't have time to hang out. They don't have time to do anything that's not adding value to their life. And I think that that's, so inspiring and motivating, because, with me, myself, I do ride share. I get up at 2:30. I'm eating. I leave out 4 o'clock. I'm at home 4 o'clock. Fix my lunch. Fix my dinner. Sit down and eat. About 5 o'clock, 5:30, maybe 6 o'clock. I'm in here in my booth, recording. After that, I'll go grab a snack, sit up on my bed, watch more TV. I'm laying it down by about 8:30. So, and that's what I do 5 days a week. On the weekends, I'm in the house, but I do my 5 episodes of my other podcast, Stuff You Should Think About. I do those on sometimes Friday or Saturday, or between those 2 days, I do those. So I'm really taking a page out of their book to operate my life as a business because, I hate that I spent so much time not operating my life as a business. And I think that's the downfall of most Americans is we don't operate our life as a business. We spend too much time just kind of hanging out and doing things that don't add value to our life. And I think that's really something that hurts us because we don't realize it till later on in life. And and you already know time you can't get back. You just can't get it back. And another thing I was thinking about earlier is one thing that I did and that a lot of people do without realizing is we get caught in a bear hug of comfort to where we're so comfortable where we are that we just say, okay, this is where I'm going to stay. And that's fine. That's fine. But the thing is, a lot of people look at other people who get out of comfort and start making moves, and they envy those people, but they still stay in that bear hug of comfort. And you have to make yourself uncomfortable, to get where you're trying to get to. You have to. You have to jump off that cliff, which is not comfortable. When you jump off that cliff, it's like anything. Anything you jump off of, when you hit that ground, your knees are going to bend. So more than likely, when you jump off that cliff, you're going to fall a little bit. You're going to get back up, but you're going to fall a little bit. Your knees are going to buckle a little bit, and then you'll build yourself back up. But when you build yourself back up, you're going to be much, much taller because now, you can stand up in that environment. So then you have courage to do other things in that environment. And then you have courage to look around and see opportunities in that environment. And then you start to stack opportunities in that environment. And then you start to elevate in that environment. And before you know it, you coasting in that environment, which at first was very scary, when you first jumped. But that's the way that you move forward, is getting through all of that and getting over that fear of breaking away from that comfort, because like I said in earlier episodes, I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I was, the house I lived in was my mom's. I think I could walk to work in 15 minutes. I could drive in like 5 minutes. The bus, I walk a block, get on the bus. Buses, one bus, downtown, take another one, go somewhere else. Real simple bus system, easy, and I could pay rent at the house when I was laid off. I was second senior welder, yada, yada, yada. And then when the economy started to make a turn, I said, well, I need to make a move. And that was when I met my ex-wife. And, that was actually the key for me moving to Detroit, because it for her, that checked off one spot on my list, meaning I had someplace to go just in case. I stepped out, but I stepped out on that comfort, and believe it or not, grown man, I should have been able to do it without that. But you got to remember, I've been in Kalamazoo. I've been in the arm of comfort so long that, it was extremely difficult for me, to get out of it. And then even when I moved to Detroit, I still, what happened? I moved here, biggest fear. My job is 30 miles away. My car breaks down on the way home. So now I got to figure out how to get home. And I also got to figure out how I'm going to get to work these next couple of days. How I'm going to, how I'm going to save up money. How, I got to find another car. I got to get to it. I got, this, that, and the other. Just all kinds of stuff. But I made it through. I made it through unscathed, learned. I got a couple other jobs and did this and did that. It helped me get over the whole money thing. And, now I'm living in that city. I'm working for myself. Been doing that for about 2 years. So, I'm making moves in that environment that I once looked at like, wow, Detroit, big city Detroit, man, you gotta be up and up, to make it in Detroit, but Detroit is the city that makes you hustle. It really does. You definitely have to have your stuff together or be able to get a job, get, something, get scrap or, something to make ends meet, because it's, like one lady told me, it's all the way live up here. It's definitely different than Kalamazoo, because in Kalamazoo, I could go visit 4 people. We could all go to the club, and I could take them home, and then be like, all right, I'll holler at y'all in a minute, and I go home and lay it down. But here in Detroit, that's not gonna happen. No, unless you maybe stay next door to me and you going around the corner to the store when I'm going, maybe. But as far as me going to pick you up, it ain't happening. With, the size of Detroit, the time it's going to take you to get there, the traffic you're going to have to fight to get there, what could happen when you get there or on the way there that you got to prepare for before you even leave. No, it's not happening. Not happening. But, like I said, I'm glad that I got out of that comfort zone, because now that prepares me to go somewhere else, to a bigger city, to, something like that, just in case. I mean, I'm not sure if I will or not. I mean, I'm 53, so it all depends. If somebody makes me a good enough offer, then I'll go. But my hope is for one of my podcasts, either this one or the other one, my hope is that one of those starts to generate an income, because my plan is to replace my rideshare income with a podcast income down the road once I get my catalog up on my podcast, and then we'll see. After that, I'll start kind of making moves from there and see how I can turn this into something. But that's all I kind of wanted to say. It's about 6:30. I'm finna relax. I got some chips from the store. I probably shouldn't be eating, but I got some chips, some Doritos and some corn chips. But I'm gonna do that and probably chill and relax a little bit before I, turn in. But I hope everybody had a good day. If you didn't, you'll be okay, because you woke up today. There's always another chance tomorrow. So don't sweat it. If you, and hopefully you, will wake up tomorrow, you got another chance at life. I'm G. I'm out.